still very early and the sun is just beginning to show itself very shyly on the horizon when Susanne wakes up and stretches with relish. It takes a lot for Susanne not to jump up, full of anticipation, and run around excitedly, but she can just about control herself. Today is going to be such a great and exciting day, it would definitely be worth showing her excitement. Unfortunately, however, Ramirez is very sensitive when he doesn't get his 9 hours of beauty sleep, and Susanne wants to avoid upsetting her father at all costs today. She would be risking too much because he might get grumpy and forbid her to go on her planned trip today. So, Susanne gets up calmly, trying to be as quiet as possible, and trots over to the riverbank for a drink. She looks excitedly at her reflection in the water, and with a smile, she brushes a few hairs off her face. "You look pretty, my child," says a frog, who is sitting very close by and whom Susanne hadn't noticed. "Oh, thank you. Sorry, I did not see you there. Good morning," Susanne replies, and smiles at the frog, pleased with the compliment. "Good morning, my child. Don't worry that you didn't see me. I'm often overlooked because I'm good at hiding. To be honest, I'm actually very proud that you didn't see me. That's my tactic to survive, replies the frog, and smiles back at Susanne. "Oh, I see. Well then, I'm glad I only gave you a compliment and wasn't rude," says Susanne, laughing, and looks at herself again in the water. Her cheeks are now a little red because she's ashamed of not having recognized and greeted the frog. It's a special frog. The frog was called Professor Dr. Ferdinand and was a true legend in the area. Nobody really knew how old Professor Dr. Ferdinand actually was, and everybody just respected the old frog, whom one rarely saw. It was common that no one called him by his name. "Well then, I must go because I have some very important things to do, my child," said Professor Dr. Ferdinand and waved at Susanne with a smile. "Only in conclusion, I would like to say to you, your plan today will go well, but it will not turn out as you imagined. Welcome the change of plans, and you will have a delicious time," said Professor Dr. Ferdinand and laughed out loud. "Thank you for your kind words, but I don't quite understand. How can a time be delicious?" Susanne wanted to know, but it was already too late. Professor Dr. Ferdinand had already disappeared, and Susanne could no longer see him. Confused, but still very happy that her plan would succeed, Susanne went back to the group where Ramirez had just woken up and was smiling at his daughter. "Susanne, you're up so early. I was about to go for a little run to get my circulation going when I saw, to my amazement, that you're already awake. How comes? You're usually not quite the earliest bird," asked Ramirez, and yawned heartily. "Oh, I just woke up early, Daddy. It's probably because I fell asleep so early yesterday," replied Susanne, who didn't want to tell her father about her plans for the day just yet, but first wanted to make sure that Ramirez was in a good mood. "Ah, maybe you're a bit more like me than I thought before." "Ah, man, that would be nice," said Ramirez jokingly and slightly nudged Susanne. As if you were unhappy with me. But ask what you want to ask me," answered Susanne and winked at her father. "Questions? Me? What should I want to ask you?" answered Ramirez, hypocritically closing both eyes. "You must have wanted to ask me if I'd like to go jogging with you, right? You must have wanted to ask me if we'd go running together like we used to, right, Daddy?" laughed Susanne and also squeezed her eyes playfully. "Well, I would be very happy if we went running together again, definitely. I could also imagine not running a big lap with you today, but a small one, like we used to do," Ramirez answered hopefully. "Okay, Daddy, that's how we will do it," answered Susanne and jumped off. Before Ramirez knew what was happening to him, Susanne already had a considerable lead over him. "Come on, what are you waiting for?" shouted Susanne loudly from afar, and Ramirez had to hurry to catch up with Susanne. After a little more than half an hour, the two came back to the group, which had now almost completely woken up. Only a few young lambs were still sleeping next to their mothers, who were very happy about the moments of silence. After a short time, Susanne and Ramirez had reached Samantha, Susanne's mother, and stopped just in front of her. Well, my two busy ones, you obviously had a very sporty start to the day. How was your round of jogging? Asked Samantha, laughing. Oh, it was great. Your daughter is getting faster and faster. I had a lot of trouble catching up to her, said Ramirez laughingly, and kissed Samantha. Oh, what? That is just too nice. He caught up with me after a minute. How did you sleep, Mummy? Asked Susanne, smiling warmly at her mother. Oh, I slept wonderfully. But speak, Susanne. I know you so well that I can see that you have a plan for which you would like to have our approval. So speak, my daughter. What would you like to do today? Asked Samantha, and smiled knowingly at Susanne. Oh, Mommy, you just know me too well and can probably see everything. I would very much like to go and see Gerry today. It has now been a week since I met Gerry and we helped him to his hurt, remember? Unfortunately, he hasn't been able to visit me yet, so I want to go and visit him today. That's what friends do, right? They see how each other's doing and they pay visits. May I go, please? Susanne put all her hope in her last words and smiled at her parents. But of course you can go to visit Gerry. However, I have one condition under which I'll let you go. Only that one condition. You have to have breakfast with us first, and I want you to be back here by dusk at the latest. Shall we do it like that? Is that okay? Asked Samantha, smiling at Susanne. Okay, let's do it like that, replied Susanne, delighted that her parents allowed her to go to Gerry, and hugged Ramirez and Samantha in a stormy, warm hug. It was still very early in the morning when Susanne parted from the group and headed towards Gerry's home. She had eaten breakfast with Samantha and Ramirez and was so excited for her great day and seeing Gerry again that she jumped in the air every few feet. After about half an hour, Susanne reached Gerry's herd and was warmly greeted by the goats. Apparently, Gerry and his parents had told everyone in the herd about Susanne because Susanne was received very warmly and a few goats even hugged Susanne in the greeting. Susanne felt like a hero. What a great feeling to be greeted in such a friendly way, thought Susanne, and wondered where she could find Gerry. However, before Susanne could ask a nearby goat about Gerry, she heard a loud voice calling her name. Susanne, is it you? Can it be? Hello, here I am, Susanne, called Gerry loudly and waved over to Susanne from the other side of the group. Gerry, my friend, called Susanne and stormed towards Gerry, stopped abruptly in front of him and hugged Gerry warmly. How nice to see you, Susanne, my friend. How are you? Asked Gerry and returned the hug deeply. Oh, thank you. I'm fine. I was hoping every day that you would come to visit me, but unfortunately you didn't come to visit me. So I decided to take matters into my own hands and pay you a visit. Why not, right? How are you? How is your ankle? Asked Susanne and looked inquiringly at Gerry and then at Gerry's ankle, which was in a bandage. Oh, I'm doing very well, and my ankle is healing well too. I've got a leg brace right now, but I'm sure it will be removed in a few days. It will probably be a while, so unfortunately I haven't been able to visit you yet. I think I should be fine in a week or so. I thought about you every day too. How nice of you to drop by, answered Gerry, and beamed at Susanne. Oh, I'm so happy to hear about that. Hey, I thought you weren't 100% fit yet, so I thought about something that we could do today. What do you think about cooking together? We could cook for our parents and mine. That doesn't require too much exercise from us, and we can still have a great time together. What do you think of that? Asked Susanne and smiled at Gerry, curious what he would think of her suggestion. Oh, yes, that sounds great. I have never cooked, though, so this is going to be quite an adventure, isn't it? Asked Gerry, a little unsure, but very excited. Oh, this is going to be easy. I've never cooked either, but I know that as long as we follow a good recipe, it should be pretty much perfect. Do you know a good recipe? Asked Susanne hopefully. Ooh, unfortunately no. What do we do now? Asked Gerry with a worried look. We're just going to be asking some of your neighbors here if they know a good recipe. Who do you think we should ask? Replied Susanne with a confident look and a rather calm voice. Oh, that's a great idea. That could actually be the solution. Let's ask my mother, the manager of our kindergarten, and the saleswoman in our little kiosk for some good recipes. I'm sure we'll receive some great suggestions, Gerry replied, pleased to have a plan for the day. Mama, you still remember Susanne, don't you? She helped me when I injured my ankle. We want to cook together today, but unfortunately, we don't have a good recipe that we could cook. Can you suggest us a good recipe? Gerry asked his mother Daisy the dough excitedly, who immediately looked at Susanne and Gerry with a smile. Ah, Susanne, my love, of course I remember you, said Daisy, hugging Susanne warmly. So you two want to cook? Oh, that's quite an adventure. You can also hurt yourself there, though, said Susanne knowingly and with a glance at Gerry. We know that, Mom. We'll be careful. But do you know a good recipe we could cook? Gerry asked impatiently again. Of course, my dears. I think you could make pasta. You need 3 parts wheat flour, 1 part durum wheat flour, some salt and olive oil, and some water. You can make a great tomato sauce for this sauce. And a small salad, and you have a really delicious meal that everyone's going to love. Daisy replied excitedly and smiled. Ooh, yeah, pasta with tomato sauce and a side salad. Oh, that sounds great. What do you think, Gerry? Asked Susanne excitedly, smiled at Daisy, and turned questioningly to Gerry. Yes, that sounds good, but I'd like to explore some more ideas before we decide. Thank you, Mom, answered Gerry, turned to the group, and quickly limped away. Thank you very much. I think Gerry would like us to go to the kindergarten and ask if they know about a great recipe, said Susanne, smiling at Daisy, and hurried to follow Gerry. Oh, look at that! They posted the recipes of the week here at the board in front of the kindergarten. Why do you think that is? Gerry asked Susanne when they both reached the kindergarten and looked around a bit to see if they could spot anyone they could ask for a recipe. That's a good question. I think what catches the eye here are the allergens, right? So that's probably why they put it up here in the kindergarten, so that the parents can see directly what their child can eat and what they can't eat. I mean, some individuals are allergic to certain foods, such as nuts, replied Susanne, happy to be able to share her knowledge with Gerry. Oh, I see. Thanks for the explanation. So it probably makes the most sense if we prepare a meal that contains as few allergens as possible, so that we can share it with as many individuals as possible, right? Answered Gerry, carefully studying the menu of the week. Yes, I agree with you. I think we could make oven vegetables, which should probably suit everyone, well, almost everyone quite well. We would only need vegetables as we find them. That means potatoes, broccoli, tomatoes, peppers, zucchini, maybe some fennel. For seasoning, we could use salt, pepper, herbs, and garlic. And for dipping, we could make a hummus. For that, we would need some chickpeas, oil, salt, pepper, spices, garlic, lemon juice, and water. What do you think? Susanne asked Gerry, translating the options of the menu with the fewest allergens for Gerry as best as she could. Ah, yes, oven roasted vegetables sounds good. Well, I generally have an appetite for a dish from the oven, but I'm not completely convinced yet. Come on, let's go to the kiosk and ask if the saleswoman can recommend us another oven dish. What do you think of that? Asked Gerry, already turning back to the kiosk. Great, now we can choose from 3 dishes. I think that's a great choice. So let's do it. Off to the kiosk, replied Susanne and followed Gerry, who showed her the way back to the kiosk. Hello, Valeria. How are you? Gerry asked the kiosk seller when Susanne and Gerry entered the kiosk. Hello, Gerry. Hello, Susanne. I'm fine. Thank you very much. How are you? You look like you have a great plan for the day. What are your plans? Asked Valeria, smiling at Susanne and Gerry. We want to cook today. At the moment, we are collecting recipe ideas for this, and we've already been able to collect 2 great recipes. Do you have a recipe for us that we could prepare? Asked Susanne excitedly, smiling at Valeria. Of course, my dears. My recipe suggestion is not only for cooking, but also for baking, but I'm sure that could also be done by you. How about pizza? It's a favorite food of mine and very easy to prepare all by yourself, replied Valeria, beaming with joy at being able to make a good suggestion to Susanne and Gerry. Oh, pizza sounds wonderful. That's a great suggestion, exclaimed Gerry happily. I haven't had homemade pizza in a long time. I'm craving that, shouted Susanne beamingly, and the three laughed loudly. Oh, you're lucky, you two. I made fresh pizza dough for myself just yesterday, so I can give you enough of that to make pizzas for you and maybe for your parents. However, let me explain to you briefly how you would prepare the pizza dough. You need about 3 parts of wheat flour, 1 part of water, some yeast, and some salt. You mix this together and let it rise for a few hours. After that, you put the dough in a cool place, for example in the cellar or in the refrigerator. After about 12 hours of chilling time, the dough is ready and stays good for about a week. This dough is also super tasty for breads, by the way. Well, I just made a lot of pizza dough, so you can have some of it. How does that sound to you? Asked Valeria. Oh, that sounds great. Thank you so very much. But how do we do that with the pizza, though? Unfortunately, we don't have a pizza oven, answered Gerry, and Susanne just sadly shook her head. She didn't have a pizza oven either. Oh, that's not a problem. A normal oven will do just fine. First, you want to take part of the dough and heat it in a pan. To do this, you spread the dough out in the pan until it has the shape that you want it to have. Then you top the dough with a sauce, put your toppings on it, and wait, checking the pizza several times, until the dough base is good, said Valeria, glad to be able to dispel the worries of Susanne and Gerry. Oh, that's super cool. Do you always make your pizza without a pizza oven? I mean, how do we know when the pizza base is good? Asked Susanne curiously. Yes, I always make my pizza without a pizza oven, and it turns out perfectly every time. When you leave the pizza, you just have to make sure that the pizza base keeps its shape. So the pizza is stiff and that you discover a few burnt spots if you like them. Then your pizza is almost ready and now only has to be put in the oven for a few minutes on the top baking sheet level. And in no time at all, you will have a super delicious pizza. How does it look? Do you want a little bit of my pizza dough? Asked Valeria, smiling and lifting a large bowl onto the counter. Oh, yes, please. Could you give us enough dough for 3 pizzas? That would be great. Oh, and we'd love to take some toppings with us too. Could we add onions, garlic, olives, peppers, mushrooms, broccoli, zucchini, and corn? Asked Susanne excitedly. Oh, but of course, my dears. There you have everything. Let me know on your next visit how you'd liked the pizzas. Have a nice day, answered Valeria, handed Susanne and Gerry the ingredients, and waved goodbye. Oh, wow! Now we have all the ingredients and we can make some delicious pizza. Nothing can go wrong from now on, said Gerry excitedly and confidently. Susanne smiled and just nodded. Unfortunately, the two were wrong. While preparing the pizzas, Susanne burned herself slightly when she wanted to take a pizza out of the oven. Luckily, it was only a minor burn, and Susanne was able to cool the burned area with cold water immediately. In total, Susanne and Gerry prepared 3 pizzas, all with a tomato sauce. The first pizza had garlic, onions, zucchini, and mushrooms as a topping. The second pizza was topped with olives, peppers, zucchini, garlic, and onions. And the third pizza had as toppings corn, peppers, garlic, and onions. Susanne and Gerry put a lot of effort into preparing the pizzas, and the pizzas all turned out delicious. Gerry's parents got a piece of the pizza, as did Susanne's parents when Susanne came back to her herd in the evening. Everyone praised the pizzas, and everyone was impressed by the adventure that Gerry and Susanne had had today. Back, again very close to the riverbank, Susanne looked in the direction of Gerry's herd and said loudly, "Good night, my dear friend Gerry. It was a great day with you, and I'm so glad to have learned with you how to prepare delicious pizzas. I am very happy to see you again soon and to experience many more wonderful adventures with you. For our next meeting, I will show you my favorite place at the lake. Sleep well, my dear friend."